boss. And to begin the hour, he has 20-some years experience in responsible investment research. Socially responsible companies intrigue Michael Jantzi, CEO of Sustainalytics. He has some ethical stock picks that are good for your soul and your investment portfolio. Next. If you want to invest your hard-earned money for an environmental and social purpose and get a good financial return to boot, it is doable. Michael Jantzi is one of the pioneers of socially responsible investing, which takes into account environmental, social, and governance issues. He is in Vancouver for a global business conference which focuses on the environment. It is my pleasure to welcome Michael Jantzi, CEO of Sustainalytics, to Studio 4 to tell us more. Nice to see you again.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here with you again.
We talked in my radio days, as I recall.
We did indeed. We did indeed. The years pass by.
Don't they? I'm a little older, you're a little older, and I'm still older than you.
Well, hopefully we're wiser.
Hopefully. But I remember when we first talked, and the idea of ethical investing was a bit weird.
Yeah, it was. The idea that investing was only to make money, and that was the beginning, middle, and end of the story was pretty hardcore in those days. I'm happy to report that as the years have gone by, the dialogue has opened up, and people now realize that, well, when you're examining a company, you need to know as much as you possibly can about that company, and environmental issues, employee issues, how that company is dealing with the communities in which it operates. These are all absolutely critical to how that company is going to perform financially over the long term. So things do change.
Of course, and as you know, there's no sure things in investment gain, but nobody wants to invest their money in a green company and lose money.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the fact is that, you know, you can do both. And I think of a company as an iceberg. And, you know, when we're looking at a company, you need to know as much as you possibly can about it. And I just argue that if we're just using the traditional financial tools, you're just getting a snapshot of what that thing looks like above the surface. Don't we want to know what's below the water level? And it's only when we start looking at a broader range of issues that you really get a true sense of what that company's about. And
how difficult is it today to figure that out, considering amalgamation? The question being, who owns who?
Yeah, well, you know, when we last talked, you know, the company that I ran was really focused on North America, and we've had to grow our business to do, you know, exactly what you've highlighted as a big challenge. And so now we have more than 100 people in about 9 offices around the world, and I described them in exactly how I did back then. They're a cross between a very traditional financial analyst and an investigative journalist or a private detective, and they're going to any means necessary to try and uncover the skeletons that might be in the closet to make sure that companies are actually walking the talk.
Sure, because a Colgate-Palmolive could own a cigarette company, could. Don't know if they do, but they could. And you say, Colgate-Palmolive, that's toothpaste. But is it good toothpaste? Is it as good as Tom's of Maine? Do you ask those questions, or is that too minor?
No, we do. We look at what the company does in regards to the products and services, but we're also very interested in how they make what they do, or make the products and so on. So where are they making them? What does their supply chain look like? How do they treat their employees? How do they engage with the communities where their factories or operations are located? Are they operating in a way that's closed loop? So are they, you know, having a very light footprint from an environmental standpoint on the earth? Those types of things. So it's what they make and how they make it that are really critical to our process.
And how they treat their employees, if they're using child labor, if they're outsourcing, where are they outsourcing? How are those people treated? How are those people paid?
Absolutely.
That's a big job.
It is a big job, and, you know, even though we've got 100 people working on those types of issues, we certainly can't cover everything ourselves, and we rely on the expertise of a lot of different stakeholders, whether they're civil society here in Canada, in the United States, around the world. We rely on faith-based groups. We talk to industry associations, governments, regulators, First Nations. We've got a good circle of groups. It's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together.
Sure.
You know, it's like you get as many pieces in there as you possibly can.
if I want to invest in a silver mine, an ethical silver mine in Chile, I probably won't fly to Chile. If I invest in an ethical silver mine in Houston, British Columbia, I can go there, I can see if they're capping, if they're doing the right thing in the silver mine, if there's acid rock drainage. Well, if I know something about mining, if I don't, but mining companies have reputations, as you know, and some haven't been so good in the past, and some are excellent today. So how do you know if you're investing in a mine in Chile or a foreign country?
We have contacts all around the world that help us put those pieces of the puzzle together. And you know, a really critical part of the research process for our analysts is talking to the companies themselves. And so you know, we're talking to the companies, we visit sites. Now, I mean, our people can't visit every single silver mine in every single part of the world, but we do visit sites. And when we're there in those places, we're not just meeting with the company, we meet with local stakeholders, again, whether they're municipal leaders, environmental leaders, employee groups, and so on. So you get that 360-degree view of the company.
Well, some resources you can do the math. If you know where the diamonds are coming from, if they're coming from the northern Canada, you're pretty sure that they're not blood diamonds.
Right.
They're coming from Africa?
It's a little bit more difficult.
Some are, but some are great.
Yep, and it is true. And so, you know, we have partners in, as I said, in certain areas of the world. So the supply chain is a huge challenge for investors who are doing research like we do. And you have to rely on trusted partners in that part of the world. And so we've got NGOs and civil society groups. We work with groups in China, for example, to look at the child labor issues. The blood diamond issue is a critical one. Conflict minerals, generally, it's not just diamonds. I mean, we look at our cell phones and our electronic devices are made with minerals from some of those conflict zones, and that's a big concern right now.
And minerals are a big concern because everybody's after minerals. And how do you know? Do you say, okay, I'm buying an iPhone and I want to know if this piece of something came from a good source or a not so good source?
Well, right now there's a lot of effort, and in fact, south of the border, the U.S. Congress now is looking at a conflict minerals bill. So, I mean, these are things that are not just on the minds of investors, but they're now on the minds of government regulators and so on, and that puts it on the corporate agenda. So, I mean, there are things that, you know, individual companies will find it difficult to do as individual entities, but when they start to collectively, as industries, look at some of these challenges, then they can start to make movements. And we've seen that in the computer industry, dealing with e-waste, the electronic waste, where they're collectively looking at how to bring that in and dispose of it in a more environmentally friendly way. So there are a lot of industry initiatives that are done collectively, even though they compete on a day-to-day basis.
Of course, and as you know, when the government comes in and makes the rule, most corporations will follow. If the government doesn't make the rule, corporations don't have to follow. They make money. Not all. But we looked at it certainly in the logging industry in British Columbia before we had a forest practices code or all of that. And when the rules changed, then the big companies said, okay, you know, we'll have a forest engineer and forest scientist in the woods with the loggers to make sure this is sustainable. We're not chopping down the oldest tree in the forest necessarily.
Right. To me, you need a mix of both. You certainly need a strong policy framework that sets the rules. But I think really, from my perspective, a lot of the government framework sets those minimum standards. And what's really exciting to me, and what the Globe Conference that you highlighted off the top is really about, is that companies are here in a big way because they're innovators, and they view the sustainability angle, environmental initiatives, as being a real boost for innovation within their own companies. And so I find that a lot of companies actually go well beyond the policy and the regulations because they can make money from it. And that is the beautiful thing about this, that, you know, being a good environmentalist in the corporate sector means you're saving energy. It means you're saving on waste costs. It means you're innovating and ahead of your competition. So there's a strong business case.
So you look at a company that's making a newfangled solar panel or a wind farm.
Absolutely, or even traditional products can be made more efficiently from an energy and waste perspective, which makes them cheaper to manufacture for the company's sake and better for the environment overall. So it can be a win-win.
Example, company, stock.
Well, I think if you look at electronic devices, for example, and you look, different manufacturers are finding ways to cut down on the materials that they put into the cell phones or the mobile devices. Right. They're looking at ways to make those things more energy efficient. You look at heavy appliances like washing machines, refrigerators, and so on. Less materials going in, losing less energy. It saves consumers money, it saves energy for the grid. You don't have to keep building power plants and so on. So these are the types of things that are win-win for everybody.
Sure, they don't have to retool and do that all. So you buy a front-load washer. You do the math on the front-load washer, and I don't know the companies that make them necessarily, but apparently it's more eco than the top-load washer.
They are. They use less water. Which is, believe it or not, is a constrained resource, although we may not believe it in this part of the world. Loses less electricity, so there's less energy consumed, and the way that they are built uses less materials. So again, that's
the only problem is when you turn them on and your clothes are in there, you can't open the door. With the top load, you can throw the underwear in. With the front load, not so much. Once you start the wash,
it's in.
The wash is.
But they're cleaner coming out.
Cleaner coming out, and they smell good and all of that. So we're top load or front load fans for sure. And in Europe, forever they've had front load washers.
They have been, and in most parts of Asia as well. And that's because, in part, the environmental regulations, the life cycle. Regulations demanded that those companies were manufacturing environmentally sensitive appliances.
Okay, so the buzzwords are environmental, social, and governance.
Right.
Environmental is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
However, people do disagree on what's enviro and what's not.
It's true, but I think there's a general feeling it's about making sure that you're minimizing the inputs and then
carbon
on
footprint,
the other side,
reuse,
water,
recycle, rethink, do all of that. Social, what does that mean?
Well, social are those things that we've mentioned a little bit. It's about making sure that your employees are treated well, and that's just good business. You know, if you're treating your employees well, there's less turnover. Turnover is expensive for a business. They're more productive, and there are a lot of studies in that regard. You have a better time attracting higher quality graduates into your company, so there's a strong business case. It's about labor rights, child labor rights, those types of things. It's about making sure that you're engaging with the communities where you're operating. You see here in British Columbia a perfect example. If you're not engaging with First Nations communities, other communities well ahead of your planned projects, that can run into you can run into trouble in the permitting process, and in business, time is money. So better to have those folks on your side of the table as opposed to the other side of the table.
So do you examine things like oil sands, tar sands, oil or tar sands, depending on which side of the debate you're on?
Well, we say oil sands. My colleagues in Europe and other parts of the world always refer to it as tar sands. But our business is we're not making a lot of judgments in the sense of saying, well, gold is good or bad, or mining's good or bad, or oil's good and bad. What we're trying to do for our clients is distinguish about those companies, even in those challenging sectors like oil, that are doing a better job than their industry counterparts.
Because client makes the last decision. Obviously, if I'm a fan of nuclear power or not a fan of nuclear power, my decision. Some people will tell you it's the future, others say we shouldn't be anywhere near a nuclear power plant, and on it goes.
Right, and I mean, oil sands is the same way. I mean, let's accept the fact oil sands is not an energy efficient business, it's a dirty business, but it's clear to us, and it has been for 20 years, that there are players in the oil sands that do understand their environmental, social responsibilities to a greater extent than some of their industry counterparts, and have been working to improve their performance over a long period of time. So we're able to, or we believe at Sustainalytics, we can differentiate between those best of sector, or best of class actors, and those that aren't doing as good a job.
So as the world runs out of cheap oil, and we don't want to depend on the Middle East, can we extract oil in Canada and send it to the United States and other places, in China, or can we send lumber there and do it well?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think, and many of our clients, it's that we think oil sands will be developed, and we want to make sure it's developed in the most sustainable way possible. But it's not just an either-or situation. A lot of our clients are very interested in finding ways to get funding to the new types of energy, whether that's solar or biomass
Sure.
or wind or what have you. So we have to get away from this either or. We have to open up the dialogue and say it's not just about the Middle East or oil sands, it's about a whole other host of options, and we need to make sure that the policy framework, the tax framework, and there's money that's available to fund these early stage companies.
Right, get through the smoke and mirrors, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Michael Jantzi, our guest, he's in town for a Globe conference, starts tomorrow.
Today.
What is today? The 14th.
Today,
You're
yeah.
right. Starts today, goes
Yeah.
through the 16th. We'll return.